Evan, I wouldn't touch that clause with a 10-foot pin, the buyer's lawyer muttered, right before the entire conference room fell silent. My latte went cold. His Mont Blanc froze mid-air like a guillotine blade caught halfway down. Every head turned toward the paragraph in question, the one I'd written 4 years earlier on a Sunday when Evan was probably somewhere in Miami, strategizing with his third executive assistant/life coach. But I'm getting ahead of myself. 3 months before that moment, before everything flipped, I was just the ghost in Solaris Dynamics' machine, the woman behind the curtain, senior contracts specialist. No one remembered my title unless something broke. I didn't mind most days. I drafted the frameworks, licensing ladders, vendor agreements, the compliance language that made Solaris worth more than its logo. Yet, every investor call, Evan would grin and toss out lines like our airtight contracts, personally designed by yours truly. I'd just sit there in my corner adjusting commas while he harvested LinkedIn glory. You ever pack a man's parachute mid-freefall, then hear him brag he folded it himself? That was my job. I'd log in before sunrise, fix 36 typos in a press release written by someone who thought fiduciary was a French pastry, then be told I lacked team spirit for skipping the company pancake breakfast. I didn't wear the branded hoodie. I didn't fake laugh at Bryce from sales or his startup guru jokes. And when Evan once joked during an all-hands about Dana's dark magic legal spells saving us again, everyone laughed. I smiled too, even when it tasted like gravel. I wasn't there for applause. I was there because this was the one thing I was good at. Forcing order out of chaos. Turning frat boy brainstorms into enforceable contracts, one clause at a time. Now, before we go further, a quick note. 93% of you are listening to stories like this one, nodding along, nuking your lunch, without hitting that subscribe button. Go on, tap it. Maybe click like while you're at it. It keeps the caffeine flowing. Trust me, this one's worth it. Anyway, back to being invisible. They called me Dana the Machine because I didn't miss deadlines, didn't make mistakes, didn't complain. Once rewrote a 50-page vendor agreement in less time than marketing needed to decide between 2 mug slogans. Sip happens. I still have that cursed mug. Truth was, I didn't want credit. I wanted control, consistency, clean margins. I wanted to be left alone with my red lines and my reputation as the woman who could outcontract God. But when the acquisition whispers began, I felt the shift. Evan started showing up late, dropping hints about new yacht brokers, skipping board prep. Suddenly, I was asked to summarize every contract structure for onboarding. I was quietly uninvited from strategy meetings. My drafts appeared with someone else's initials in the footer. I told myself it didn't matter. I was paid to think, not to be seen. But there's only so long a person can live in the margins before they notice who's holding the eraser. The first time I met Nathan, the shiny new external counsel Evan brought in, he was wearing cufflinks shaped like tiny gavels and reeked of citrus cologne. The kind of man who says, "Let's circle back," when he means, "I'm about to steal your work." He handed me a stack of my own contracts, printed, highlighted like a freshman's exam prep, and asked me to summarize the logic behind the structure. His tone made it sound like I was a janitor being asked to explain a mop. I stared for a beat. You mean the licensing scaffolding that's literally holding your entire acquisition together? He grinned. Exactly. Just bullet point it for the data room. I wanted to ask if he'd ever read a contract sober, but instead I nodded and went back to my desk. I summarized all 64 pages line by line, not because it was my job, but because if they were going to screw me over, I wanted the paperwork to scream their names when it exploded. The next morning, Evan appeared at my desk, flanked by HR like mall cops. "We're restructuring," he said, voice dripping with that faux calm tone of someone already rehearsing the press release. "Your roles being sunset after the acquisition. You'll have a month to transition everything to Nathan." Sunset, like it was a spa treatment. My hand stayed still. Transition to what exactly? I asked. Knowledge dump, Nathan chimed, grinning. Evan leaned in. You've done great work, Dana. But this is the big leagues now. Don't worry. We'll litigate you quiet if it comes to that. I looked at him. Then I smiled. Of course. Took my cactus, my Sip Happens mug, and walked out. No door slam, no drama. But as I turned in my badge, I noticed something. The new ID system hadn't revoked my archive access. Not yet. I drove home through the quiet suburbs, headlights reflecting off wet asphalt, the kind of silence that hums louder than noise. I didn't cry, didn't curse, just parked, made a cup of coffee, and sat at my kitchen counter with a legal pad. I started writing names. Not enemies, not allies, threads. People who'd seen things, signed things, left traces. Because here's the thing, Evan never understood. Quiet people write everything down. At first, it was just about clarity. I lit a candle, cracked open a can of Diet Cola, and pulled out an old hard drive labeled Solcore V1.2 in fading Sharpie. It hadn't been touched in years, back when Solaris was 5 people and a folding table in a shared workspace near Denver. I wasn't angry yet, just curious. I wanted to understand what they thought they were selling. Evan had always been slippery. His idea of due diligence was asking if someone felt trustworthy while signing 6-figure contracts over craft whiskey. Nathan was worse. Corporate bleach, scrubbing every trace of authorship until no fingerprints remained. But they both made the same mistake. They assumed the past decays. It doesn't, not if you know where to look. I began digging through folders, frameworks, licensing chains, draft histories. My name was everywhere, in tracked changes, in comments like Dana, double-check jurisdiction clause. But the final versions? All stripped clean, stamped with Evan's favorite preamble. These clauses reflect Solaris's commitment to innovation and transparency. Translation: I copied this and took credit. Then, buried inside a directory labeled Founders Archive Alpha, I found it, a single document, IP Transfer Proto 6.4e POD PDF. The file opened slow, like it knew the weight it carried. Transfer of intellectual property licensing shall require dual authorization. Primary executive and designated legacy officer of record, as appointed by founding officer Mark J. Ellis and filed under Compliance Clause 6.4e. I froze. The hum of my refrigerator sounded like thunder. It was clean, unambiguous, and signed by Mark Ellis himself, the company's original founder before Evan staged his little coup. And there, at the bottom, clear as sunrise, Legacy Officer of Record, Dana L. Mercer. No expiration date, no successor, no revocation. I remembered that day vividly. Mark insisted we build redundancies into early licensing protocols. Never trust a man who loves PR more than product, he'd said, half smiling. Make sure no one can sell what they don't understand. We filed the clause, notarized, stored it in compliance archives, and moved on. When Mark was forced out 2 years later, the executive wellness retreat scandal, remember that one? No one cleaned up the paperwork, least of all Evan. That clause wasn't a relic, it was a landmine. Every licensing transfer, every piece of IP Solaris owned, required my authorization, and no one in the acquisition knew it. My hands shook, but my face stayed calm. I checked the metadata, untouched for years. Original signatures intact. I emailed a copy to myself, printed 3 versions. One for my lawyer, one for safe storage, one for the fireproof box under my bed. It didn't feel like victory. It felt like holding a loaded weapon with my name etched on the side. I didn't sleep that night. Just lay there, eyes open, staring at the ceiling. Evan hadn't fired me. Not really. He'd just unlocked a door I'd been polite enough to keep closed. 3 days later, the acquisition packet started circulating. I wasn't supposed to see it. They'd locked me out of the system. But Evan, in all his brilliance, forgot one thing. He never deactivated the old compliance review at Solaris Dine. Alias, the one I'd built years ago for audit routing, and someone BCC'd it by mistake. I skimmed at first, told myself I didn't care. Then I hit Appendix C, Legacy Licensing Protocols. My clause. Except it wasn't. They'd changed 3 words, enough to gut its power. Where it once read, shall require dual authorization. Now it said, may be approved by executive or legacy officer. That single or turned a legal firewall into a wet napkin. I stared at it, pulse steady, fury cold. It was like seeing my own signature forged in neon ink. So I did what I do best. I wrote. Subject. Quick note on Clause 6.4e. Hi, Nathan. Reviewing Appendix C, noticed a material deviation from the original clause filed under Compliance Record number 2178 MJE. Attached original draft, timestamps, and co-founder sign-off. Let me know if you'd like a refresher on the intent. Best, Dana Mercer. I didn't accuse, I didn't threaten, I just handed them the rope. Then I waited. 24 hours passed. Silence. 48. Nothing. By the 72-hour mark, I texted Casey, my old law school roommate who now worked at an M&A firm in New York, and asked for a quick sanity check. 10 minutes later, she called, her tone sharp enough to cut glass. They altered your clause? Yep. Without your consent? Correct. She exhaled a low whistle. Then the whole acquisition's dead on arrival. If the buyer's lawyer has half a brain, that clause is voidable. Every product built on that license, legally floating in space. I sat there, staring at the forged clause glowing on my screen like a neon confession. It wasn't just a typo. It was a bomb wired under a $78 million deal. That night, I labeled every document, cross-checked file hashes, and backed them up to 4 separate places. One of them, a thumb drive duct-taped inside a cereal box labeled Fiber Fuel. Old habits die secure. Then, I watched every press release Solaris pushed out. Evan posing with champagne, Nathan hashtagging #deal of the year, employees commenting with fire emojis. They had no idea what they were sitting on. The thing about metadata they never understood is that it doesn't care about ego. Titles don't impress timestamps. Digital paper remembers. 3 days later, a ping lit up my phone. A LinkedIn message from a kid named Jake. Profile, junior analyst at Westbrook Capital Partners, the private equity firm acquiring Solaris. MBA candidate, still using a graduation photo as his headshot. Hi, Dana. I came across your name in some early licensing documentation during diligence. Just wanted to confirm, were you ever formally removed as legacy compliance officer? That was it. A simple, polite question from a kid who didn't realize he'd just pulled the pin from a grenade. I read it 3 times, then typed, slow and calm. Hi, Jake. Good question. No, I was never formally removed. I was asked to prepare a transition guide, but no updated designation was ever filed. Let me know if you need anything further. Best, Dana. I hit send. It felt like flicking a pebble into a canyon and hearing the echo come back as thunder. 2 hours later, my phone rang. New York area code. I didn't answer. I wasn't ready to perform. Instead, I poured a glass of Cabernet I'd been saving since the Series B round, back when I still thought Evan might grow into the role of CEO instead of just faking it better. I replayed every meeting from the last 2 years. All those times someone said, "It's just procedural," or "We're streamlining legacy infrastructure." I used to think they were lazy. Now I realized they were blind. The next morning, I checked the old system logs, still active. My name, Dana L. Mercer, listed as L on 2 archived platforms that hadn't been decommissioned. My authorization was baked into every audit trail that mattered. Then came another email, this time from a senior associate at Westbrook. Hi Dana, following up on Jake's outreach. We've identified several documents under your authorship that contain active licensing frameworks. Would appreciate a short call to confirm historical context around Clause 6.4e and related compliance obligations. Best, Priya. Polite, professional, the kind of tone lawyers use when they already know the answer. I waited an hour, then replied with 3 time slots. No emojis, no fluff. When we spoke, I was composed, measured sentences, phrases like "to the best of my recollection" and as previously documented in the founding compliance log. I gave no opinions, just facts, dates, and file paths. Halfway through, Priya asked, "Was there ever formal notification of a role change or revocation of your status as legacy officer?" I paused, long enough for silence to hum. "No," I said finally. "I was asked to write a transition guide, that's all." She didn't respond immediately, then quietly, "Thank you, Ms. Mercer. That's very helpful." We ended the call. And just like that, the buyer's legal team knew something Evan didn't. The signature they needed wasn't his. It was mine. I didn't gloat, didn't post vague quotes about karma on LinkedIn. I just opened a new folder on my desktop and titled it, "When They Realize." Evan strutted around Solaris like a peacock in a rental tux, barking deadlines and pretending confidence while the foundation cracked beneath his Italian loafers. Quarter-end bonuses dangled like carrots dipped in whiskey. Every day, he barked, "Let's close this by Friday," while ignoring the red flags blinking like Christmas lights in hell. On Tuesday, he called a war room meeting. Translation: group yelling. Nathan sat beside him, flipping printed contracts like a magician faking competence. Neither noticed the buyer's side had gone strangely quiet. That same afternoon, Westbrook's senior counsel sent a note to Solaris's data room. Licensing appendix. Foundational clause unclear. Authorship unverified. Please advise. Evan brushed it off. "Clean it up," he told Nathan. "Add something about executive discretion," as if patching a foundation crack with duct tape. He had no idea the hammer was already swinging. That evening, while Evan was busy rehearsing his deal, closed grin in front of the bathroom mirror, my inbox chimed. An email from Priya. "Hi Dana, we've identified Clause 6.4e in the IP appendix as material to the acquisition. To confirm enforceability, could you verify authorship and provide any relevant historical context? Best, Priya Shah, Senior Associate, Westbrook Capital." I didn't rush to reply. I read it twice, sipped my coffee, and smiled. The kind of smile you give before watching a slow-motion domino fall exactly as planned. Then I opened my receipts. I had everything: the original clause, untouched since 2018, the approval chain showing Mark Ellis's co-founder signature, the compliance memo explicitly stating Clause 6.4e shall not be modified without written authorization from Legacy Officer Mercer. Even the old Slack screenshots where Mark joked, "Dana writes contracts like commandments, chiseled, eternal, and mildly terrifying." So I replied, "Hi Priya. Attached is the original clause authored by me on March 12, 2018, along with timestamps, metadata, and co-founder sign-off per Internal Compliance Policy 6.4e. Let me know if additional clarification is needed. Regards, Dana L. Mercer." I didn't bold or underline a thing. Truth doesn't need formatting. I hit send and went back to stirring my soup. 3 hours later, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I ignored it. Then came a text from Casey. "Girl, buyer's team is in DEFCON 2. Someone just dropped the original clause and a full signature log in their lap. Tell me that was you." I didn't reply. Instead, I laughed. A quiet, tired laugh. This wasn't revenge yet. This was gravity. Evan had kicked the ladder, and I'd simply let him fall. By the next morning, whispers had turned into tremors. Evan stormed around the office, barking at assistants to fix the comms flow, while Nathan pretended to type important things. Quarter end was 2 days away. The deal worth $78 million sat on the table like a ticking clock. Then came the buyer's response. Westbrook requested a clarification meeting. Virtual, urgent. Evan hated Zoom calls, said they flattened his presence. Translation: the camera couldn't Photoshop his charisma, but he showed up anyway, collar crisp, tan, overcompensating for anxiety. On the other side of the screen, Linda Grayson, Westbrook's lead counsel. If a scalpel billed by the hour, it'd look like her. Beside her sat Priya, Jake, and one silent attendee. Camera off, mic muted. Me. Thanks for joining, Linda began, voice calm, precise. Evan leaned back, doing his trademark power smirk. Of course. Let's keep this efficient. We're all eager to close. Linda didn't smile. Before we proceed, we need to address a small discrepancy in the IP appendix. Clause 6.4e. Evan waved dismissively. Just formatting, I think. Nathan? Nathan adjusted his tie. Yes, likely an old draft. The clause was interpreted as permissive. Linda interrupted. No, it wasn't. Her tone sliced through the air. The original filing, authored and executed by Ms. Dana Mercer, states dual authorization is required for all IP licensing transfers. That language was altered unilaterally. Without her co-signature, this acquisition cannot close. The silence that followed could have frozen lava. Evan blinked, smile twitching. Well, Dana no longer works here. Surely there's a workaround. Linda didn't flinch. There isn't. Your counsel missed this. We didn't. Nathan tried to speak. We assumed the role was retired. Linda tapped her pen once. You assumed wrong. For a full 5 seconds, no one breathed. Evan looked towards someone off camera, lips tight, eyes darting. And me? I said nothing. Didn't even smirk. I just listened to the sound of a multi-million-dollar deal grinding to a halt. My silence louder than any speech. Finally, Linda closed her folder. Until the legacy officer signs, this transaction is unenforceable. We'll reconvene once proper authorization is secured. The call ended. Evan's face froze mid-smile. His reflection lingered on my darkened camera square, the ghost he'd tried to erase staring right back at him. The next morning, the conference room at Solaris looked like a stage before a tragedy. Evan showed up in a navy suit so sharp it could have drawn blood, hair shellacked into perfection, smile glued on like he believed he could will the universe back into compliance. Nathan followed, clutching a tray of Solaris-branded pens like they were ceremonial swords. The buyer's team, Linda, Priya, Jake, were already seated, calm as winter marble. One empty chair sat at the far end of the table. Mine. Morning, Evan chirped, too loud. Let's make this official, shall we? No one replied. Linda cleared her throat. As discussed, execution will proceed once all required signatories are present. Nathan nodded too fast. Everything's reviewed on our side. We're ready. Not quite, Linda said, sliding a folder across the table. This document requires dual authorization under Clause 6.4e, the legacy officer's signature. Evan chuckled, nerves humming underneath. Yes, we've heard your interpretation, but Ms. Mercer no longer works here. She, left under tense circumstances. We're willing to assume the risk. Linda didn't even look up. That's not how this works. He leaned forward, voice syrup smooth. Look, she's a disgruntled ex-employee. No stake, no authority. Linda's eyes met his, flat and final. She's not disgruntled. She's documented. She's the legally designated legacy officer of record, with no formal revocation filed. That makes her a required signatory. Without her, you don't own what you're selling. The sentence hit like a gunshot in a church. Nathan flipped through the packet as if an escape clause might appear if he turned fast enough. The junior associate beside him looked like she wanted to crawl into her binder. Then the door opened. I stepped in wearing gray. No makeup, no jewelry, hair tied back in a simple knot. Every eye turned. Evan froze, caught between indignation and panic. Linda gestured to the empty seat. "Ms. Mercer, thank you for joining us." I nodded once, took my place, and opened the folder in front of me. I read slowly, methodically. Adjusted 2 commas, struck an unnecessary and clarified 1 subsection header. My pen moved steady. Surgical precision in ink. When I reached the final page, Evan leaned forward, voice low and cracked. "Dana, if this is about money..." I didn't look at him. Linda slid another document toward me. A revised version, compliant and clean, with an attached retainer agreement listing me as independent compliance consultant. I skimmed it, found one line I'd written years ago, still intact, still mine. Then I signed. Evan exhaled like someone had unplugged his confidence. Linda took the folder, stamped it, and passed it to her assistant. "Thank you," she said. "That completes execution. No applause, no theatrics, just the soft click of a Mont Blanc cap and the thick paper silence of power changing hands." Evan sat motionless, watching the deal leave his grasp 1 signature at a time. Linda turned to him. "We'll be in touch regarding transition logistics." Then, almost as an afterthought, "Our transition, not yours." He blinked. Twice. The words landed like gravity. That afternoon, the press release dropped. Westbrook Capital completes strategic acquisition of Solaris Dynamics. Welcomes compliance consultant Dana Mercer to oversight team. That last part wasn't negotiable. My retainer was permanent, my authority embedded in the structure of the new ownership. No dotted line to Evan, no hierarchy. Just independence. A firewall built in legal ink. 2 hours later, Evan was summoned to a closed-door meeting with Westbrook's executive board. It lasted 9 minutes. He walked out without his badge, his jaw clenched, his shoulders smaller. The official statement said he'd transitioned to an advisory role. Reality? He was finished. At dusk, I passed by the Solaris building one last time. The glass gleamed faintly gold, reflecting a skyline that no longer belonged to him. I didn't go in. I didn't need to. I'd already written myself back into the story. Evan wanted to be the face of the brand. Turns out the ink that mattered was mine. They tried to erase me. Instead, they engraved me. And that, dear listeners, is how the quiet one, the invisible contract ghost, became the signature that outlived every CEO's swagger.